The Velroth Empire had conquered 17 star systems over the past 300 years. Their warships were massive and dark, built to inspire terror in any species that saw them approaching. Their soldiers were brutal and efficient. Their commanders were ruthless and cunning. In all their centuries of expansion across the galaxy, no species had ever successfully resisted them for long. They had crushed rebellions on dozens of worlds. They had enslaved billions of creatures from countless planets. They believed themselves to be the supreme power in this corner of the universe, and until now, nothing had proven them wrong. High Commander Zelthos stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and prepared to deliver his message to the newest target of the Empire. He was an impressive figure even by Velrath standards. He stood 7 feet tall, with scales the color of deep space covering his muscular body. 4 gleaming yellow eyes sat in a face that had never learned to smile. His voice was deep and carried the weight of absolute authority. He had led more than 40 successful conquests in his career. He had never known defeat. The communications officer looked up from his station. "Hi, Commander. The broadcast link to the human homeworld is established. Their entire planet will receive your message simultaneously." Zelthos nodded slowly. He had done this many times before. He knew exactly how it would go. First would come the terror. Then would come the panic. Then the governments would crumble as populations fled in every direction. By the time his fleet arrived, most of the work would already be done. Fear was the greatest weapon in any conqueror's arsenal. And Zelthos had mastered the art of creating fear. He straightened his posture and began to speak. "Attention. Creatures of Earth. I am High Commander Zelthos of the Velrath Empire. Your world has been selected for conquest. Within 30 of your planetary rotations, my fleet will arrive at your solar system. You will not be able to stop us. Your primitive warships are no match for our power. Your weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Your defenses will crumble like sand before the tide." He paused for effect, letting his words sink in across the billions of receivers on that distant blue planet. Resistance is not merely futile, it is foolish. Those who surrender peacefully will be granted the mercy of servitude. Those who resist will be destroyed without hesitation. We have prepared labor camps to house your population. Your strongest will work in our mines. Your brightest will serve our scientists. Your children will be raised to serve the Empire. Your world will become another jewel in the crown of the Velrath Empire, and your people will learn the meaning of obedience." He leaned forward, his 4 eyes narrowing with menace. "You have 30 rotations to prepare for our arrival. Use them wisely. Gather your leaders and tell them that surrender is their only option. This is the only warning you will receive." The transmission ended. Zelthos allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. It was a good speech. He had refined it over many conquests, adjusting the words each time until they achieved maximum psychological impact. The formula was simple but effective. Promise overwhelming force. Remove all hope of victory. Watch the enemy tear itself apart before you even arrive. He turned to his intelligence officer, smaller Velrath named Vorax, who had been studying the human species for several months. "How long before we see the panic begin?" Vorax checked his monitors with eager anticipation. "Based on our models, we should see government emergency broadcasts within the hour. Civilian riots should begin shortly after. Major population centers will likely experience evacuation attempts within the day. By the end of the week, their social structures should be collapsing." "Excellent." Zelthos settled into his command chair with the comfort of someone who had seen this play out many times before. "Alert me when the chaos begins. I want to watch their civilization crumble." 3 hours passed, then 6, then 12. Vorax grew increasingly nervous as he stared at his monitoring equipment. Something was wrong. The readings made no sense. He ran diagnostic after diagnostic, convinced that his instruments must be malfunctioning. The data could not possibly be accurate. Finally, with great reluctance, he approached the High Commander with trembling hands. "I have a report on the human response to your declaration." Zelthos did not look up from the tactical displays he was reviewing. "Proceed, sir. There appears to be no panic." Now Zelthos looked up. All four of his eyes focused on the intelligence officer with dangerous intensity. Explain. Humans received your message. We have confirmed this through intercepted communications. Every major government, every news network, every individual with a receiver heard your declaration of war. The message reached approximately 8 billion individuals. Vorak swallowed hard. His scales had gone pale with fear. They are laughing, sir. The silence on the bridge was absolute. Every officer stopped what they were doing. Every eye turned toward the conversation happening at the center of the room. No one dared to breathe. Laughing, Zelthos repeated slowly, as if the word was from a language he did not speak.
Yes, sir.
We have intercepted thousands of communications. The dominant emotional response appears to be amusement. They are making jokes about your declaration. They are creating humorous images and videos. They are treating the announcement as entertainment. On Earth. In the headquarters of the United Nations Space Defense, Commander Lisa Morgan had just finished watching the Velrath Declaration for the third time. She was a woman in her early 40s, with short brown hair, and the kind of calm confidence that came from 20 years of military service. She had commanded ships in border skirmishes. She had negotiated with hostile alien traders. She had faced pirates and smugglers and corporate mercenaries. She had seen things that would give most civilians nightmares, and right now, she was laughing so hard that she had spilled her coffee all over her desk. "Oh my God," she managed to say between gasps of laughter. "Did you see his face? He was so serious. He really thought we would just roll over and surrender." Her aide, a young lieutenant named Danny Park, was trying very hard to maintain his professional composure. He was failing miserably. A smile kept breaking through despite his best efforts. "Ma'am, should we perhaps consider this a serious threat?" Lisa wiped tears from her eyes and took a deep breath to compose herself. "Danny, these guys have 2,000 ships. They have never fought anyone who actually pushed back. Their weapons technology is at least 30 years behind ours based on the scans we got from their probe last month. Their shields are based on principles we abandoned decades ago because we found better options." She shook her head with genuine bewilderment. "They walked into our corner of the galaxy and picked a fight without doing any real research. That is honestly adorable." She forwarded the video to Admiral Kevin Price, who was the highest-ranking officer in the entire human space fleet. He watched it during his lunch break while eating a turkey sandwich. He chuckled at the dramatic pauses. He smiled at the threats of destruction. When it was over, he sent it to the Joint Chiefs of every nation with a single comment attached. "Looks like someone didn't do their homework." The Velrath Declaration of War had become the most watched video in human history. News networks played it on loop with commentary from military experts who pointed out all the tactical mistakes the aliens had already made just by announcing their intentions. Late-night comedians devoted entire segments to mocking the dramatic speech. Social media exploded with jokes and memes and creative remixes. A college student named Chris Hall, studying music production in Ohio, downloaded the audio of Zelthos speaking and turned it into an electronic dance track. The beat dropped right when Zelthos said "crumble like sand before the tide." It hit 10 million views in less than a day. By the end of the week, it had reached 100 million. The Velrath intercepted all of this. Their translators worked perfectly. They understood every word, every joke, every mocking comment. And none of it made any sense to them. High Commander Zelthos sat alone in his quarters that night, watching humans dance to a remix of his war declaration. And for the first time in his long career of conquest, he felt something he did not recognize. It would take him many days to identify the emotion. It was doubt, High Commander. Zelthos summoned his intelligence officer to the war room 3 days after the declaration. The room was large and dark, filled with holographic displays showing star maps and fleet positions. Massive screens lined the walls, each one showing different feeds from human communications. Vorax entered with his head bowed low, knowing that he was about to face questions he could not answer. "Explain this to me," Zelthos said without looking at him. His 4 eyes remained fixed on a screen showing human news broadcasts. A woman with bright blonde hair was interviewing a human military officer. Both of them were smiling as they discussed the upcoming invasion. "Explain why these creatures are not afraid." Vorax approached the central display table and activated his report. Charts and data points filled the air around them, floating in precise holographic formations. Sir, I have reviewed all of our intelligence on the human species. I have gone through every piece of data we collected over the past 2 years. Everything in our assessment indicated they would be an easy conquest, and yet they laugh at us. Yes, sir. Vorax pulled up the key findings with trembling hands. The humans achieved faster than light travel only 80 years ago. Their expansion has been limited to their own solar system. They have colonized their moon, established stations around their gas giants, and built mining operations in their asteroid belt. But they have not spread beyond their home star. They have no colonies in other systems. They have no experience with interstellar warfare. Zelthos turned to face him, all 4 eyes burning with cold anger. Continue. Their military vessels number fewer than 300. Most of these are small patrol craft designed for system defense against pirates and smugglers. They have no experience with large-scale space warfare. Their weapons technology appears functional but unimpressive by galactic standards. By every metric we use to assess potential targets, humanity ranks as a minor species barely worth the effort of conquering. Then why, Zelthos said slowly, each word carrying dangerous weight, are they treating our declaration of war like a celebration? Vorax had no answer. He had spent 3 sleepless nights trying to find one. He had reviewed every piece of data his team had collected. He had analyzed communication patterns and social structures and governmental responses. Nothing in his experience or training explained what he was seeing. What Vorax did not understand. What the entire Velroth intelligence apparatus had completely failed to grasp was that numbers and metrics alone could never capture what humanity truly was. The report said humans had achieved space travel 80 years ago. It did not mention that they had gone from their first powered flight to walking on their moon in only 66 years. It did not mention that this pace of advancement was unprecedented in galactic history. Most species took thousands of years to make the same journey. Some took tens of thousands. Humans had done it within a single lifetime. A man who watched the first aircraft fly as a child could have watched the first moon landing as an old man. The report said humans had limited military experience in space. It did not mention the 2 world wars they had fought against each other on their home planet. It did not mention that these conflicts had killed nearly 100 million of their own kind in less than 50 years. It did not mention that humans had developed weapons capable of destroying their entire civilization multiple times over, and had somehow managed not to use them against each other. Any species that could survive its own capacity for violence is not to be underestimated. The report said human weapons technology was unimpressive. It did not mention that humans had split the atom, mapped their own genetic code, created thinking machines, and cured diseases that would have ended other species entirely. It did not mention that their greatest technological leaps had always come from competition and conflict. When humans wanted to solve a problem, they solved it faster than anyone thought possible. When they wanted to build something, they built it bigger and better than planned. And when someone threatened them, they responded with creativity that bordered on madness. Most critically, the report completely failed to understand human psychology. The Valrath had conquered many species over their 3 centuries of expansion. All of them had reacted to threats with fear and submission. This made perfect sense to the Velrath mind. Fear was logical. When facing a superior force, the rational response was terror and surrender. Every sentient creature in the galaxy understood this basic truth, except humans. Humans had a completely different relationship with fear. They told stories about monsters because they enjoyed being scared. They created entire industries around simulated danger and artificial terror. They jumped out of aircraft for fun. They climbed mountains that could kill them just to prove they could reach the top. They dove into deep oceans with nothing but a tank of air. They watched horror films and rode roller coasters and sought out experiences that would terrify any sensible species. When humans faced a genuine threat, something happened in their minds that the Velrath had never encountered before. Instead of freezing in terror, they got excited. Instead of running away, they started planning how to win. Instead of surrendering, They started laughing and making jokes and placing bets on the outcome. Lieutenant. Commander Marcus Cole understood this perfectly. He was stationed on the Lunar Defense Platform, a massive installation built into the gray rock of Earth's largest moon. He was 34 years old, with a shaved head and an easy smile that never seemed to fade. He had grown up playing video games about alien invasions. He had watched countless movies about humanity fighting back against overwhelming odds. He had dreamed his entire life about being part of something exactly like this. A reporter had traveled all the way to the moon to interview the soldiers stationed there. She wanted to understand why morale was so high when they were facing an enemy with nearly 7 times their numbers. Marcus leaned back in his chair and thought about the question for a moment before answering. Look, these Velrath guys have 2,000 ships. We have 300. On paper, that looks really bad for us. But here's what they do not understand. Our 300 ships were built by people who have been imagining this exact scenario for over a century. Every captain, every pilot, every gunner out there grew up dreaming about defending Earth from aliens. We have been preparing for this our whole lives without even knowing it. The reporter asked if he was scared at all. Marcus laughed loudly at the question. Scared, lady? This is the coolest thing that has ever happened to any human being ever. My grandfather flew fighter jets in wars on Earth. My father commanded a submarine under the oceans. I get to defend the entire human species from actual alien invaders. My family's going to talk about this for generations. My great-great-grandchildren are going to brag about me. This attitude was everywhere across human space. Recruitment offices were overwhelmed with volunteers eager to sign up. Factories were offering to convert their production lines to military equipment at no extra charge. Universities were opening their research labs to help improve weapons and defenses. Private companies were competing to contribute to the war effort. The entire species was mobilizing not with fear and panic, but with enthusiasm and excitement. Admiral Kevin Price held a press conference to address the public directly. He stood at a podium with the flags of every Earth nation arranged behind him in a show of unity. His hair was gray and his face was lined with age, but his eyes were sharp and his voice was steady and strong. The Velrath Empire has declared war on humanity, he said simply. They believe we will be easy to conquer. They believe we will surrender without a real fight. They believe their superior numbers guarantee their victory. He paused and allowed himself a small, confident smile. They are wrong about all of it. We have faced threats before. We have fought wars before. We have overcome odds that should have destroyed us many times. And we are still here. We are still standing. He looked directly into the camera with eyes that had seen decades of service. To the Velrath, I have a simple message. You have made a terrible mistake. You have picked a fight with the wrong species. And when you arrive in our solar system, you will learn why humanity has survived everything the universe has thrown at us. The press conference ended and the clip went viral within minutes. Somewhere in the darkness of space, aboard the Eternal Conquest, High Commander Zelthos watched the human admiral speak. He saw the confidence in those old eyes. He heard the certainty in that steady voice. He noticed that not a single human in the audience looked afraid, and for the second time in his long career, he felt doubt growing in his mind. The Velrath Advance Fleet entered the solar system on the 15th day after the declaration. 50 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of human space, their dark hulls gleaming against the distant stars. Each vessel was massive, bristling with weapons that had burned cities on a dozen conquered worlds. They flew in perfect formation, a demonstration of military precision meant to inspire terror in anyone who saw them coming. Commander Krath led this advance force. He was a decorated veteran with 30 years of service to the Empire. He had personally overseen the subjugation of 3 species. He had crushed rebellions and executed resistance leaders, and watched entire civilizations bow before Velrath power. He expected this mission to be simple. Arrive at the human system, destroy any resistance, prepare the way for the main fleet. His sensors detected the human response almost immediately. A small group of ships was moving to intercept his formation. He counted them carefully on his display and felt confusion ripple through his 4 eyes. 12 ships. The humans had sent 12 ships against his 50. Are they surrendering? His second officer asked with uncertainty in his voice. Perhaps this is a diplomatic envoy. Krath studied the approaching vessels. They were smaller than Velrath warships, sleeker in design with smooth lines that seemed almost elegant. They moved with a coordination that suggested experienced crews. They did not look like diplomatic vessels. Open a channel, he ordered. The communication link connected. And Krath found himself looking at a human male with dark hair and an expression he could not quite identify. The human was sitting in a command chair, surrounded by displays and officers who all seemed remarkably calm. This is Commander Krath of the Velrath Advance Fleet. You are facing overwhelming force. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. The human smiled. It was not a nervous smile or a fearful smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something Krath did not. Welcome to Seoul, the human said cheerfully. I am Captain Ryan Torres of the carrier Defiant. You have about 30 seconds to surrender before this gets really embarrassing for you. Krath stared at the screen in disbelief. He had threatened countless species over his career. He had seen fear and desperation and hopeless defiance. He had never seen anyone smile at him like that. You have 12 ships, he said slowly, as if explaining something to a child. I have 50. Your mathematics must be different from ours. Our mathematics is fine, Torres replied. But I appreciate the concern. Clock is ticking, Commander. 20 seconds now. Krath terminated the communication with a growl of anger. All ships open fire. Destroy them. What happened next would later be called the 17-minute war, though the actual fighting lasted only 11 minutes. The remaining 6 minutes were spent by Velroth survivors, desperately trying to escape. The human ships moved in patterns that seemed completely chaotic at first glance. They scattered in 12 different directions the moment the Velrath opened fire, making it impossible to concentrate weapons on any single target. Velrath gunners tried to track them, but the small vessels changed direction so quickly and unpredictably that targeting solutions became worthless within seconds. Then the humans started shooting. Back, Captain Torres had not been boasting. Human weapons technology was not 30 years behind the Velrath. It was 30 years ahead. The weapons that burned through Velroth's shields, like paper, had been developed through decades of research driven by imagination and competition. Human scientists had grown up watching science fiction and dreaming about energy weapons and shield generators. When they finally had the resources to build such things, they built them better than anyone expected. The first Velroth ship exploded 4 minutes into the battle. Its shields failed completely under concentrated fire from 3 human vessels that had coordinated their attack through neural link. Technology the Velrath had never encountered. The crew had no time to understand what was happening before their ship became an expanding cloud of debris. The second ship died 30 seconds later. Then the third. Then, for more in rapid succession, Commander Krath watched in horror as his fleet was systematically torn apart. His tactical displays made no sense. The human ships were not fighting like any enemy he had ever faced. They took risks that should have been suicidal. They flew directly toward his heaviest weapons, somehow dodging fire that should have been impossible to avoid. They seemed to know exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. How are they doing this? He demanded of his officers, but no one had an answer. On the bridge of the Defiant, Captain Torres was having the time of his life. His neural link connected him to every ship in his squadron, allowing coordination at the speed of thought. His pilots were the best humanity had ever produced, trained on simulations that had prepared them for exactly this kind of fight. His weapons officers had dreamed about this moment since childhood. Focus fire on their command ship, he ordered through the link. Let us end this quickly. 8 human ships converged on Krath's flagships simultaneously. They came from 8 different angles, moving too fast for Velrath point defense systems to track. Their weapons fired in perfect synchronization, each blast hitting the exact same spot on the Velrath shields. The shields failed. The hull breached. The bridge exploded in a flash of light and fire. Commander Krath died, without ever understanding what had happened. The remaining Velroth ships attempted to retreat. They had entered the system with 50 vessels and absolute confidence. Now they fled in desperate panic, their formations shattered and their morale broken. Human ships pursued them to the edge of the system, picking off stragglers who could not achieve faster than light speed quickly enough. Only 8 Ulreth vessels escaped to report what had happened. Captain Torres watched them go with a satisfied smile. His squadron had not lost a single ship. They had taken some damage, but nothing that could not be repaired within a few days. The first real battle between humanity and the Valrath Empire had lasted less than 20 minutes and ended in complete human victory. He opened a channel to Fleet Command. Admiral Price, this is Torres. Engagement complete. Enemy advance fleet destroyed. We lost 0 ships. I repeat, 0 losses on our side. Back on Earth, the news spread within hours. The footage from the battle was broadcast on every network and shared across every social media platform. People gathered in public squares to watch replays of Velroth ships exploding. Celebrations erupted in cities around the world. Someone started selling shirts with the words, 17 minutes printed on the front. Admiral Price held another press conference, this time with Captain Torres standing beside him. The young captain had become a hero overnight, his face recognized by billions of humans across the solar system. Today we have proven that the Velrath Empire is not invincible, Price said to the assembled reporters. Their advanced fleet came to our system expecting an easy victory. They found something very different. They found humanity. Torres stepped forward to answer questions. A reporter asked how it felt to lead humanity's first major victory against an alien empire. He thought about it for a moment and grinned. It felt exactly like I always imagined it would. We trained our whole lives for something like this. Every simulation, every exercise, every drill. It all led to today. And I have to say, the real thing was even better than the simulations. Somewhere in deep space, aboard the Eternal Conquest, High Commander Zelthos received the report from the 8 surviving ships. He listened in silence as the terrified captains described what had happened. He watched the sensor recordings that showed his advance, fleet being systematically destroyed by a force 1/4 their size. When the report was finished, he sat alone in his quarters for a long time. The doubt he had felt before had grown into something larger now, something that felt almost like fear. He had 2,000 ships at his command, the largest fleet the Empire had ever assembled for a single conquest. He had believed this force to be unstoppable. Now, he was not so certain. The Velrath Empire did not become powerful by accepting defeat easily. High Commander Zelthos spent 3 days reviewing the battle recordings from the advanced fleet. He studied every moment of the engagement, analyzing human tactics and weapon capabilities. He consulted with his best military minds and revised his strategic plans. He would not underestimate these humans again. On the 28th day, after his declaration of war, Zelthos led the full might of the Velrath Empire into the human solar system. 2,000 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their dark holes blocking out the distant stars. It was the largest invasion fleet in Valroth history, assembled specifically to crush this strange species that refused to be afraid. Zelthos stood on the bridge of the Eternal Conquest and watched his armada take position. "Scan for human defenses," he ordered. The sensor officer worked his console for several moments and looked up with confusion on his scaled face. "Sir, I am detecting significantly more vessels than our intelligence indicated." "How many more?" "Sir, there appear to be over 700 human warships in the system, with approximately 200 more under construction at various facilities." Zelthos felt his confidence waver. 3 weeks ago, humans had possessed fewer than 300 military vessels. Now they had more than doubled that number, with hundreds more being built. How was this possible? The answer was something the Velrath had never encountered before. Humans did not build ships the way other species did. Other species carefully planned their military construction over years and decades. They allocated resources through bureaucratic processes. They debated designs in committees. They moved slowly and methodically. Humans did none of this. The moment war was declared, every factory on Earth had offered to convert to military production. Private companies competed against each other to build ships faster and better. Universities released experimental technologies that had been sitting in labs for years. Workers volunteered for double shifts. The entire species had mobilized with an enthusiasm that bordered on madness. What had taken other civilizations decades, humans accomplished in weeks. Admiral Kevin Price commanded the defense from the orbital station Citadel, a massive installation that served as the central hub for all human military operations. His tactical officer, Commander Nicole Harris, displayed the incoming Velrath fleet on the main holographic screen. 2,000 red dots moved slowly toward Earth, surrounding it like a closing fist. 2,000 enemy vessels confirmed, sir, she reported calmly. All warship class. They are advancing in standard conquest formation. Price studied the display with experienced eyes. And how many do we have ready to fight? 712 combat-ready ships, sir. Another 200 will be operational within 6 hours. Planetary defense systems are fully charged. All civilian populations have been moved to shelters. Good enough. Price opened a communication channel that connected to every human ship in the system. His voice would be heard by tens of thousands of officers and crew members, all waiting for his orders. All ships, this is Admiral Price. Today we show the galaxy what happens when you pick a fight with Earth. Let us make this quick. I have dinner reservations at 7. The joke got the response he wanted. Laughter echoed across the fleet, breaking any tension that might have built up. Human crews checked their weapons one final time and prepared for the biggest battle their species had ever fought. The fleet advanced with the confidence of centuries of successful conquest. Their tactics were refined through generations of warfare. They assumed their enemies would fight defensively, protecting their homeworld at all costs. Trying to minimize losses while waiting for an opportunity to negotiate surrender, humans did the exact opposite. Instead of falling back toward Earth, the human fleet surged forward to meet the Velrath head-on. They did not form defensive lines or protective formations. They attacked aggressively, recklessly, with a ferocity that seemed almost joyful. Squadron leader Scott Palmer led his wing of fast attack ships directly into the center of the Velroth formation. By any conventional military assessment, this was suicide. He was taking 30 ships into the heart of an enemy fleet that outnumbered his entire force by almost 70-1. His pilots cheered the entire way in. All wings, target their command ships, Palmer ordered through the neural link that connected his squadron. Ignore everything else. We are here to cut the head off this snake. They punched through the outer Velrath formation before the enemy even understood what was happening. Velrath ships tried to turn and engage them, but the human vessels were too fast and too unpredictable. They twisted through the enemy fleet like water through fingers, their weapons blazing constantly. Behind them, the heavier human cruisers exploited the chaos. Captain Torres had been given command of the main battle group, and he used the confusion created by Palmer's attack to devastating effect. His ships hit the Velrath flanks with coordinated strikes that shattered entire squadrons. High Commander Zelphos watched his careful battle plan collapse within the first hour of fighting. The humans were not behaving like any enemy he had ever faced. They took casualties and kept coming. They flew into certain death and somehow survived. They fought with a fury that made no tactical sense. They are insane, his second officer whispered. They are completely insane. Zelphos was beginning to agree. The battle raged for 4 hours. Human ships swarmed through the Velrath fleet like angry insects, striking and retreating and striking again. Velrath commanders tried to adapt, but every time they adjusted their tactics, the humans changed theirs. It was as if humanity had spent centuries preparing for this exact fight. In a sense, they had. Every war movie, every science fiction story, every video game about defending Earth from alien invasion had been training for this moment. Human tacticians had imagined this scenario countless times. They had debated strategies and developed counter-tactics for enemies that did not exist yet. When the Velrath finally arrived, humanity already knew how to beat them. By the 3rd hour, the Velrath fleet was in full retreat, its ships that had entered. The system with confidence now fled in desperate panic. High Commander Zelthos ordered a withdrawal, but many of his vessels never received the command. Communication networks had been destroyed. Command ships had been targeted and eliminated. The great armada of the Velrath Empire was scattered and broken. When the fighting finally ended, the results were devastating. Over 1,500 Velrath ships had been destroyed or disabled. The proud fleet that had conquered 17 star systems was reduced to a fraction of its former strength.
Survivors
Drifted through space in damaged vessels, waiting to be captured or killed. Humanity lost 47 ships. 47 out of over 700. High Commander Zelthos survived the battle. His flagship had been crippled early in the fighting, its engines destroyed, and its weapons offline. He sat on his damaged bridge and watched human marines board his ship through the emergency airlocks. He expected execution. He had ordered the deaths of millions during his career. Surely these humans would want revenge. Instead, the Marine commander, a woman named Captain Laura Webb, entered his bridge with her weapon lowered. "High Commander Zelthos?" she asked. He stood to face her with what dignity he had left. "I am Zelthos. I am prepared to die." Captain Webb looked at him for a long moment, then did something that confused him completely. She offered him a cup of coffee. "He thought you might be thirsty," she said. "It has been a long day. Now would you like to discuss surrender terms? We have some ideas we think you will find reasonable." Zelthos took the cup with trembling hands. The drink was warm and bitter and completely foreign to him. He did not understand these creatures at all. He was beginning to think he never would. The Treaty of Armstrong. Station was signed 6 weeks after the declaration of war that started everything. The document was lengthy and detailed, covering reparations and territorial boundaries and the future relationship between humanity and the Velrath Empire. But the essential terms were simple enough for anyone to understand. The Velrath Empire, what remained of it, agreed to pay full reparations for the cost of the war they had started. They agreed to release every enslaved species from every world they had conquered over the past 3 centuries. They agreed to permanent demilitarization, reducing their fleet to a small defense force that could never threaten another civilization. They agreed to open their borders to humanitarian observers who would ensure these terms were being followed. In exchange, humanity agreed not to conquer them back. Ambassador Patricia Lane led the human delegation during the negotiations. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had spent 30 years as a diplomat, negotiating trade agreements and border disputes and cultural exchanges. This was the biggest negotiation of her career, and she approached it with the same calm professionalism she brought to everything. High Commander Zelthos, stripped of his rank and title, sat across the table from her during the final session. He had aged visibly in the weeks since his defeat. Scales had lost their luster. His 4 eyes carried a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. "Could demand much more," he said quietly as he reviewed the treaty terms. "We could take our worlds. You could enslave our people as we plan to enslave yours. Why do you not?" Ambassador Lane considered the question carefully before answering. "Because that is not who we are. We fight when we have to. We defend ourselves when threatened. But we do not conquer. We do not enslave. We believe that every species has the right to exist and govern themselves, even species that tried to destroy you. Even them." She smiled slightly. "Besides, I pushed for harsher terms initially, but the general public had grown almost fond of you. You were kind of like that bully who picked on someone in middle school. Then they grew up and realized you were just insecure and scared. Hard to stay mad at that." Zelthos did not fully understand the reference, but he understood the sentiment. These humans were strange beyond his comprehension. They had every right to hate his people. Instead, they offered mercy. The treaty was signed by representatives of every human nation and the remnants of Velroth leadership. It was broadcast across the galaxy, a message to every civilization. Watching that the war was over and a new order had begun, Zelthos was permitted to retire to a small moon in the outer territories of what had been his empire. It was a quiet place, far from the centers of power he had once commanded. He spent his remaining years there, writing a detailed analysis of his failed campaign. He hoped that future civilizations might learn from his mistakes. The central thesis of his writing was simple. Never declare war on a species that treats existential threats like entertainment. Never underestimate creatures who have spent their entire existence fighting and surviving against impossible odds. Never assume that numerical superiority guarantees victory. And most importantly, never pick a fight with humans. Back on Earth, life returned to normal with surprising speed. The war had lasted less than 2 months from declaration to treaty. For a conflict that could have ended human civilization, it had been remarkably brief. People went back to their jobs and their families and their ordinary concerns. The crisis had passed, and humanity had emerged stronger than before. But the war was not forgotten. A new holiday was established, celebrated annually on the anniversary of the final battle. People gathered in parks and public squares to remember those who had fought. Veterans of the conflict were honored with parades and ceremonies. Children grew up hearing stories about the Valreth invasion, the same way previous generations had heard. About great wars of Earth's past, Captain Ryan Torres retired from active service and became a professor at the military academy, teaching a new generation of officers the tactics that had won the war. Squadron leader Scott Palmer wrote a memoir that became one of the best-selling books in human history. Admiral Kevin Price was given a statue outside the United Nations headquarters, depicting him looking up at the stars with quiet confidence. The soldiers who had fought were celebrated as heroes. The scientists who had developed the weapons were praised for their brilliance. The factory workers who had built the ships were honored for their dedication. Every person who had contributed to the war effort became part of a story that humanity would tell for generations and somewhere in the galaxy. Other civilizations watched and learned. The Velrath had been powerful but arrogant. Their fleet had been massive, but their tactics had been outdated. They had underestimated humanity and paid the price. Other empires took note of this lesson. The Thraxian collective was twice the size of the Velrath Empire. They had observed the war with great interest, initially expecting an easy Valrath victory. When the opposite happened, their leadership convened emergency meetings to reassess their strategic plans. Any thoughts of human conquest were quietly removed from consideration. The Dominion of Krell was larger still, spanning nearly 100 star systems. Their military commanders studied the battle recordings with professional interest. They analyzed human tactics and weapon capabilities. They calculated the cost of potential conflict with this strange aggressive species. Their conclusion was unanimous. Humanity was not worth the risk. The Merchant Federation of Xylos took a different approach entirely. Instead of viewing humanity as a threat, they saw opportunity. Within months of the treaty signing, they sent diplomatic envoys to Earth, proposing trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Other peaceful civilizations followed their example. Humanity found itself suddenly welcomed into a larger galactic community. Not everyone in the galaxy chose friendship, of course. Some civilizations viewed humanity with fear and suspicion. Some saw them as dangerous barbarians who had gotten lucky. Some predicted that humans would become the next great threat to galactic peace, but none of them dared to test that theory. Patricia Lane, who had negotiated the treaty that ended the Velrath War, was asked about this in an interview years later. A reporter wanted to know if she worried about other civilizations attacking Earth. She laughed at the question. Let me tell you something about humanity. We have spent our entire existence fighting against things that should have destroyed us. Ice ages, plagues, world wars. We survived all of it. We survived our own worst impulses and came out stronger every time. She leaned forward with the confidence of someone who had seen her species at its best. Any civilization that wants to try their luck against us is welcome to make the attempt. We will be ready. We are always ready. It is simply what we do. The reporter asked if she thought humanity would ever face another threat like the Velrath. Ambassador Lane smiled. Probably. The universe is a big place, and there are always going to be species who think they can conquer us. But they will all learn the same lesson the Velrath learned. You can declare war on humanity. You can threaten our world and our families and our future. She stood and walked to the window of her office, looking out at the city below where millions of humans went about their daily lives, completely unconcerned about the dangers of the galaxy. But when you do, you should be prepared for us to laugh in your face. And then you should be prepared for what comes next. The interview ended. The recording was broadcast across human space and beyond, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, other civilizations listened and learned and quietly crossed humanity off their lists of potential targets. Some species were simply not worth the trouble,